lovely people. Welcome back to another book chat. Okay, so diving back into the Kindle again, and these are actually two of my rather more recent purchases because despite the massive backlog of books that are in my Kindle, I keep seeing things and buying them, and I blame it partly on BookBub, which is just a terrible, terrible invention because it shows you all the books that it thinks you'll like, and quite often it's right, and they're always really cheap or possibly even free, which is a disaster. It's a complete disaster. A very good disaster. So I have been buying more books. Anyway, these particular ones are by a lovely author, and this was actually not through BookBub. This was because I met her online, and she's a lovely person and she writes beautifully. And these two that I've got here are the only two of hers I've read, but I intend to be reading other ones, and they are both in the Tales of Love and Woe series, which is just an absolutely beautiful name. I love it. And this is the first one, The Lonely Crow, and they are fairy tale retellings, and they're novellas rather than books. So I read them, I think, in two sort of bedtime reading sessions, which admittedly did keep me up rather late both times. I blame you, Winter, for that, but it was absolutely worth it. And this one, The Lonely Crow, is, she describes it as a reverse Boy Meets Mermaid tale, and it is beautiful. And the things to remember when you're reading these is these are fairy tale retellings going pretty much back to the rather bloodthirsty and gory roots of fairy tales. They're not pretty Disney-fied tales. But what they are is just stunning. The Lonely Crow particularly, I found myself, I'd go back and reread passages, which never seems to happen to me enough at the moment. There were paragraphs that were so beautiful that you had to go back and read them again. And that is such a fantastic thing. I love it when I find something like that. The dialogue's fantastic, it all rings really true. And The Lonely Crow in particular, yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. That one just there. It's also got an absolutely beautiful cover, which is why I've broken out my two old Kindle Fires so that I can actually show off the covers of both of these. Okay, so the next one in the series, and I believe there's a third one coming out quite soon, if it isn't already out already by the time I publish this. If so, I'll put a little note in the blog when I do so. So the second one is Rosie Waking. I can't see that now. And this one is Snow White and Rose Red mashup. I'm not massively familiar with the original fairy tales because I haven't read them since I was a little kid, and I really must go back and do that. I do have a great book of actual proper fairly old-fashioned fairy tales somewhere that I need to look up. Rosie Waking is a much darker story. It's excellent though. It's not, I never mind darkness in the story as long as it serves the story and it's not just kind of there to, you know, to create a bit of suspense or something like that, because often that doesn't work. You're just kind of like, well, yeah, no, not very nice. But this is done beautifully. It's done really, really well. What I did find with Rosie Waking is I got a little bit confused. I did kind of figure it all out at the end, but there were just certain bits in there where there were kind of jumps, and I didn't quite know what exactly was happening. So I did still enjoy it, maybe not as much as The Lonely Crow, but I would still absolutely recommend it. It's incredibly, both of them are very atmospheric, and they pull you into the story so you can really feel it. It's quite physical. Rosie Waking particularly, with some of the really sort of nastier bits in there, you're like, oh yeah, and that's wonderful, you know, it's a sign of a really good story and a really good storyteller. So I would absolutely recommend both of those, and she has some other books I have spotted, which I'm also going to be looking into because, yeah, fantastic writing, fantastic characters, fantastic ideas, and I would really recommend Winter Reid. So yeah, go check her out on Amazon or social media or whatever, and yes, particularly Tales of Love and Woe. Wonderful. Thanks very much for joining me. Let me know if you have read any of Winter Reid's other books, and if there's any particular, I know I've asked this before, but now I'm kind of like, oh yes, these fairy tale retellings are excellent. So if there's any particular fairy tale retellings that you've come across, which, you know, certain, especially ones that deal a little bit on the darker side, not too much on the sort of pretty side of things, I would love to hear your recommendations. Excellent. See you next time. Bye.